今天我们的主讲人是 Emily。Emily 是加州大学伯克利分校前招生官、美利坚大学前招生官，现在乔治华盛顿大学教育与人类发展硕士，凯尼恩学院英语学士。Emily 曾经在加州大学伯克利分校担任过招生官，审阅过数千份申请材料，十分了解顶尖大学申请流程，并拥有指导学生申请美国、英国、加拿大和其他国家大学的成功经验。现在我们就让Emily 做一下简单的自我介绍。Emily, you can start to your introduction.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Emily again, and I'm the Assistant Director of Candidacy Building at Ingenious Prep. And what that means is I head up our efforts for the programs for students who are in grades 8 through 11, so especially working with those students in the younger grades. But I am a counselor to a number of students myself, in addition to overseeing those programs. And this is my second year reading applications for Northeastern University. So I currently am reading for them for this application season. And for a couple seasons, I also read for the University of California at Berkeley. And I worked full-time in admissions at American University for 4 years. And in the past few years before coming to Ingenious, I also was a full-time college counselor in high schools. So I've had the pleasure of working really closely with students, both as an admission officer and as a college counselor on the other side of the business.
Thank you. 大家好，欢迎各位家长和学生来到影知与微软华人组织联合举办的公益讲座、课外活动兴趣探索、早期规划。我是Ingenious Prep 在西雅图地区的主管杨倩然。在我简短的介绍影知之后，今天我们的讲座将会聚焦以下的话题。首先，什么是兴趣探索？为什么重要？如何把兴趣变成活动，升华兴趣？以及最后的高中生课外活动规划。在加入影知之前，我曾在华盛顿公立学区的初中和高中教授中文和平面设计课程，所以很愿意为各位家长和学生尽我所能提供各类教育咨询。欢迎大家扫码添加我的微信，保持联系。本次的讲座是英文讲座，但每一页的内容都有中文的翻译。讲座过程中有任何问题或者希望参与我们的互动环节，请打字在聊天对话框。讲座最后我们也会有简短的互动答疑，我们的主持人会和主讲嘉宾一起回答问题。好，刚刚已经介绍了我们 Emily 的背景，那么我再简短的介绍一下我们影知的顾问团队。我们有很多的前招生官，像 Emily 一样，因为有150名以上的前招生官，所以我们能够从第一视角了解招生流程，并为学生提供专业的帮助。此外，我们还有75名以上的名校升学顾问，他们都毕业于名校，而且对写作以及申请的流程、课外规划都有十分丰富的经验，以及各高校、各机构和组织的专家学者。因为这样全面的背景和专业的经验，使得我们的团队建立了系统化和高质量的规划和各类项目课程。大家可以看一下我们去年的录取结果。下面我们将由 Emily 开始我们今天的讲座内容。Emily, I will hand over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So to give everyone an idea of what we're going to be talking about for a large part of our presentation today is this idea of interest exploration. And what that is exactly, it's taking students on a little bit of a journey through different activities to help them get acquainted with different areas of study and different disciplines within perhaps an area of study that they already know they're interested in, so that they can really find their passion and be able to articulate that through both extracurricular and academic activities. And interest exploration is really the foundation for future academic learning. So it is the starting point for students in finding those activities and those interests that are going to be the springboard into college learning. It's also going to help students with investing in high quality extracurricular activities so that as they enter high school, they are finding things that are a good fit for them independently, but also being able to show that they're a strong member of the community. That's a really important quality to admission officers. But these qualities like leadership and good communication, public speaking skills, those really take a lot of cultivation, and having that experience beforehand can guarantee getting leadership roles in high school. So as students are looking at colleges, they will hear a lot about needing to show leadership in their college applications. So that is an important piece for us. Interest exploration really benefits every student, even if students already think they know what they want to do. For example, of course, students who have no idea what they want to do, interest exploration is the most helpful. But even if students think, for example, okay, I know I'm interested in business, there are so many subfields within business. There's marketing, accounting, and so forth. So there are really myriad ways that students can narrow down within a particular field. So the idea behind interest exploration is helping them narrow that focus. So one of the things we start with when we are first working with our students is pretty simple, an interest checklist. We want students to not think about this too hard, but just think about these things right off the bat. What are their answers very quickly to questions like, what do you like to do outside of school, or when you have just spare time? Are you interested in drawing or doing playtime with children or babysitting for them? Perhaps traveling, making music, the things that students love doing and learning about, even when they don't have to do those things. Those are good indicators of what we can introduce them to next for finding a possible field of interest. And these are a few questions that students can ask themselves to help get an idea of what those interests might be. So not only what am I doing in my free time, but what are the things that really make me feel excited? Are there certain news topics, perhaps, that they enjoy reading about? Are there certain podcasts that capture their interest? What are the things that they would willingly give up time to do? And are there things they want to learn more about? Realizing that no one is an expert, of course, in perhaps 8th grade, but what are the things they want to become an expert in? And what are they starting to think about in terms of goals for the future? Interest exploration gives students an idea of what's out there so that they can try different things. Early on in high school, there is no worry at all for students not knowing for sure what they want to do. Because again, even sometimes if students think they know what they want to do, perhaps they still need to narrow that interest. But if your student doesn't already know what they want to do, that's not unusual at all at this grade level. So we will meet them where they are. We'll help them brainstorm about those areas of interest and introduce them to how to start exploring those interests through counselor-guided projects, helping them along the way to produce these projects and carry them through even perhaps a couple of years. So we'll go through some examples of those kinds of projects. But again, thinking about how to narrow down interests, I mentioned, are there newspaper articles, certain topics that come up in current events that really capture your students' interests? Or particular kinds of movies or blogs? Is your student really fascinated by YouTube videos about how things work, perhaps? Or learning about a certain career that's out there, hearing from people who work in that field. Have they done online courses? And if not, that could be a good first step that we could help them through. There are so many different websites out there like Coursera and edX, for example, and those are a great place to start. School clubs, those could be academic related like business club, science Olympiad, but also non-academic as well, maybe photography club or even a bowling club. Then there's networking with industry professionals and even just journaling, keeping a log of what their thoughts are about these different topics that they engage in. Reflective writing is a really important piece of the future college application process. How to improve expertise in your interest areas. So after students start to identify an area that they would like to explore more, the ways that they can actually develop that are applying for summer programs. Most of our students participate in summer pre-college programs through very prestigious universities and colleges in the US, but also elsewhere. They can make a start on those self-directed projects with the help of their counselor, joining research projects, and those could be in the form of an academic mentorship, which we offer through Ingenious. Could also be through a program like Pioneer Academics, or there's other ones out there like the International Research Association in North Carolina. So there's lots of different ways students can get into research, and also finding ways to combine interests. So say your student is interested in computer science, but also really enjoys art, coming up with creative ways along with the counselor helping plan for those to combine perhaps computer science and art. And importantly, showing a commitment through sustained involvement. So I think students sometimes think that they need to be a member of 20 different clubs, but that's actually not useful and it's not valued. The important thing is to have deep and sustained dedication over time in maybe a couple of different interests or activities. Okay, so moving on, shifting gears a little bit, we're going to talk about interest codification, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means exactly. So to codify something, it's finding ways to really articulate that interest. So as students think about the goals they have for their activities, some things they should really be keeping in mind as their goals are leadership, being able to show leadership, not just say they have a leadership role, such as president, but how do they show that leadership? Thinking about how they make an impact on others and on the organization, not just on themselves. Thinking about sustained involvement. So again, keeping with something over time and showing a deepened level of involvement for it over time. And making sure activities have some sort of common theme. That doesn't mean that everything needs to relate to everything else. So I mentioned a bowling club before that might not have anything to do with computer science, for example, if your student is interested in that. But overall, we should be able to see a general theme of what the student's main interest is. Okay, and that idea of deepening interest over time, interest exploration starts usually with doing several different smaller mini projects. And those are with the help of the counselor to plan those, to figure out what they want to start looking at. And then they decide after each project is over, do I want to continue looking at this? Yes or no? So to give you an example, one of my students who I've been working with for a couple of years, she thought she might be interested in business, but beyond that, she didn't know what she wanted to do. So we've gone through interest exploration, looking at accounting and marketing and finance, and helping her figure out which of those interest her most. And now that she's identified marketing, we're looking at, okay, which industries interest you? Is it the business of healthcare? Is it the business of education? Is it the business of entertainment? And so forth. And so as students start to narrow that focus, again, they'll go into a couple more focused projects usually, and perhaps find ideally a way to combine those interests. I mentioned, for example, computer science and art, combining those. And then ideally, students are finishing off right before their application season is starting, perhaps, with a grand project, a signature project that they can really show in their college applications. This is something that I've really delved into and spent a lot of time on and is unique to me. So again, codifying experiences, that means taking a passion and turning it into something that admission officers will value, or figuring out how to articulate that passion. So for a student who's interested in fitness, that might look like getting certified as a personal trainer. And for a student who loves writing, that might mean looking into ways with the counselor to pursue publication through writing contests or submissions to literary journals and so forth. We're going to look at a few different examples now for students who might have interests in a variety of different areas and see some ideas for how students with that interest might codify their interest and what that looks like. So for a student who's interested in environmentalism, perhaps that student starts out thinking, okay, I'm interested in food sustainability and environmentalism. So student works in grade 9 with the counselor to explore that interest through ways like taking an online class about the behavior of chickens and learning an online class about the meat we eat. Really interesting sounding topic. And exploring ideas about animal welfare, veganism, finding out how they can learn more about those subjects through the things that they've already done. So perhaps one of the online courses mentions another course that they can delve into. And this is also where students should start to document those experiences so that when they apply to college later, they have a full record of what they've done and they can show that. Going into grade 10 and 11, this is especially in grade 10 where we start making those long-term goals. So perhaps now that the student has confirmed that interest in environmentalism, they join the environmental club at their school. They start to look at what they can do at their school to address environmental issues. So that might look like working with the cafeteria or the dining hall to start a composting project or minimize food waste in some other way. And by the time they get to grade 12, they've narrowed their interest even more. And the student has decided they want to focus on meat production in particular. So they've created and filmed a documentary about a slaughterhouse in China. And their goal is to raise awareness about meat production and food sustainability. So they've gotten more and more narrow all the way to that signature project. Again, that idea of combining multiple interests, this is really key because there are so many students out there who will say, I'm interested in biology or I'm interested in math. But when a student can say, I'm interested in math and sports, for example, perhaps that means pursuing sports analytics. For biology, perhaps they have an interest in philosophy as well. That could mean delving into bioethics. And another example, psychology and music, musical therapy. So there's no end to the different ways that a student could go with the help of their counselor to guide them through that process. Another example for a student who's interested in veganism, further looking at food, and particularly in the context of Middle East studies. So this student started off by making some short-term goals with their counselor to learn about both veganism and Middle East studies. So that meant pursuing an internship at a vegan restaurant, perhaps shadowing the chef, talking with the CEO to learn about how the business is run, writing articles, putting that on a personal website. And as far as Middle East studies, documenting their travels on their personal website and visiting vegan restaurants along the way. They also set longer-term goals with their counselor to accomplish by the end of 11th grade, and that would mean making their personal website even more polished and more comprehensive, and focusing more on their Middle East interests through attending a conference for students. And then by the end of grade 12, again, approaching that signature, that grand project, this student pursued an academic mentorship to study veganism and sustainability within the context of the Middle East. And then they actually published their research. And that way they were able to show not just that they did this research, but that they were able to distribute it and share that knowledge with others. So that goes into that idea of showing your impact. And here's an example for a student who had several different interests, mainly in business and economics, but also hiking, something they really enjoyed doing in their free time. So with their counselor, this student made some short-term goals for both learning more about hiking and business and economics. For hiking, that was getting a leadership position within their hiking association and creating an Instagram account to promote their trips to others and show some ideas about traveling, best hiking routes to take, and so forth. And for business, they began taking a variety of online classes, specially curated with their counselor, depending on their interest. And they created an online store that focused on refurbished hiking equipment. Again, that idea of sustainability. So taking things and making sure we're minimizing waste. They built some long-term goals to accomplish by the end of grade 11th by building that social media presence, getting more and more Instagram followers through marketing themselves and self-promotion and advertising. And also showing more leadership throughout the hiking association by becoming a mentor to the younger students and expanding that online store as well. And for business, they pursued an academic mentorship to study their topic more closely. And by the end of 11th grade, as they start their senior year, their signature project has been established of making a partnership between the business and charity. So again, that showing an impact, making a positive contribution on others, and also establishing a partnership with the sports equipment stores to actually accept the refurbished equipment from customers and be able to use that to donate to charity. The takeaways from all these different examples is that it really does take time for a student to build their profile and their activity list. It's not something that can be done in 1 year, nor should it be. So it's something that does need to be started early, ideally in 8th or 9th grade. And students should be thinking about those ideas, those values of leadership, positive impact, contribution, being able to show how they've helped others positively. And the way they start is through those mini projects guided by their counselor, making small steps so that they don't feel too overwhelmed. Because if they just hear, oh, I need to make a signature project, oh, that might be very intimidating for a student. But when we can say, no, let's just focus on our mini project that we have right now and evaluate how you feel about those topics once we're finished with that project. That's how we help students over time narrow that focus more and more. And now we're going to shift into thinking about extracurricular activity planning for high schoolers. So what should they be doing in terms of their activities? Why do the extracurricular activities matter? So now that we've thought about interest exploration and we've looked at some examples of activities, how do those translate to a college application? Well, colleges want students who are active and who make those positive contributions, both inside school, but also outside of school. And they want to know how students have developed and pursued their talents and interests over time. So students need to be able to show what their interests are and explain what they're doing in their free time, because that helps colleges understand who they are as students. And participation in something in high school is a good indicator that they're going to participate in that thing in college as well, because really colleges are thinking about the community of students they are putting together on a campus. They want to make sure that students are not all just holed up in their rooms studying all day long, but who are also getting out onto the campus and being active members of the college community. That's a really important value that admission officers want to see, that students have the desire to be involved. What counts as an extracurricular? Sometimes I've had students think that unless it's part of an official club, that it doesn't count. So they'll say, well, I watch my brother after school and I help him with his homework. That counts as an activity. So, and that surprises some students. So the top thing here, school clubs, that's the most obvious answer for what counts. But that could be academic, thinking about robotics team, a science Olympiad, speech and debate. Could be hobbies. So for a student who is really passionate about film, maybe they are part of a film club or they make a film blog, that counts. Being part of the student government at school, getting involved in community service, whether that is through a school service organization or just through outside school efforts, like working with the local animal shelter or with Habitat for Humanity. Sports, JV or varsity, that could be through the school or outside school. I have a student who is a fencer and her school doesn't offer fencing, so she does that outside of school. Arts, perhaps taking individual art classes on the weekends or getting involved with theater productions at school as an actor or working stage crew. Media, writing for the school newspaper, or if the school has a radio station, that's another cool way to get involved. And also cultural activities. One of my students is really involved with the Chinese Students Association at her school, and she's getting involved in a Lunar New Year production that her school is putting on. So that's another great way. All right, I'd love to hear from you all what you think about this idea, whether you think it's true or false. Admission officers care more about your involvement in an activity than the category of the activity itself. What do you all think? If you'd like to put your answers in the chat box or the Q&A, that would be great. Let us know what you think. So do you think admission officers care more about the student's involvement or the category of an activity itself? Okay. Yep, a couple people have said true. Yes, and that is the case. It is true. As an admission officer, I am more interested in seeing the student's depth of involvement in something, whatever that is. So I've had students who are really passionate about solving Rubik's Cubes and getting faster at solving Rubik's Cubes. So if the student can show me how they've done that over time, they've become better at it, but also, again, how they've shown leadership. Maybe they've become the president of the Rubik's Cube Club. Maybe they've shown other students how to solve a cube. Those are all ways of showing those positive qualities. So it's not important what the activity is, just that students are passionate about it and they're showing dedication. Thinking about how colleges actually evaluate students' extracurricular activities, there are several different levels that we would put involvement into as admission officers. So the top level, the first level, is when a student shows a really unusual level of strength in one or more areas. So perhaps they have a national level recognition in a math competition, or they are the statewide head of something, perhaps. The second tier would be they are making a strong contribution within their school in ways like being class president or another leadership position like newspaper editor, so something more local. The third would be they definitely participate at a good level, but there are no special distinctions, not much leadership. The fourth would be not much participation at all. The fifth is that they actually have substantial activities outside of the traditional things, and that might be family commitments or work. Maybe the student needs to work 15 to 20 hours per week to help their family. That would be part of that category. And the sixth would be there are special circumstances, perhaps family or medical issues that are limiting or preventing participation at all. So those are the broad categories that Harvard, for example, is looking at. So the takeaway is that that level of participation really matters. One of the things that students will list in their applications is how many years that they've done each activity and how many hours per week estimated have they done each activity. So as an admission officer, as I'm reading applications now, I would rather see that a student has a few different activities where they are really spending a lot of their time than to just have a student list member, attend meetings, but there's not really a lot of depth in any of the activities. So the higher ranking a student can receive in those activity categories from the admission officer, the better the chances of college acceptance. This pyramid kind of puts things into a visual way to understand this. So starting at the bottom, the foundation, that is that level of interest exploration, trying different activities, figuring out what they're interested in. Moving on to 10th grade, going up a level, they're starting to narrow their activities and find out what they really care about. Moving on to 11th grade, going up a tier, they're working toward becoming a leader and really starting to show how they're making that impact with their activities. And then the highest level, as a 12th grader, ideally they will have become an expert in their area of interest, and they can really show how they've grown that knowledge and established their leadership within that field. Ways that students can take advantage of extracurriculars at high school. This is an example for a student who's interested in STEM. As a 9th grader, they tried 2 different clubs, math and biology. They tried some coding classes, read a variety of science books. They went to a chemistry summer program, and they did an informational interview to find out more about what it's like to be a doctor and what it's like to work in IT. As a 10th grader, the student decided not as so interested in biology, but they stayed in the math club. They wanted to continue learning more coding, so they joined the robotics team to do that. And they continued reading more about technology and ended up going to a coding summer camp. So as you can see, they left behind the chemistry and biology interest. Doesn't mean that wasn't valuable experience, but it helped them figure out what they want to do. As 11th grader, the student became the president of the math club. So now they're a 3-year member of the math club. They entered and won some robotics competitions with their team. They started a nonprofit to teach others coding to underserved communities. and they're starting to undertake college level research. And then ultimately, as a 12th grader, they're really up at the top of their field. They are the president of their math club and the robotics team. They have placed in rigorous competitions. They are expanding the impact of their nonprofit, so getting involved with other community organizations. And they have secured a competitive internship offer, so they can show they are getting some real world experience. And here's an example for a student interested in humanities. This student starts off 9th grade trying 3 different clubs. They're really not sure yet, so they try English, history, and math. They begin doing some reading and writing on their own, reading different fiction, going to a business summer camp, and playing soccer. So lots of different interests there, and that's fine. As a 10th grader, they decide English was the one that really stuck with them. And they also want to look at creative writing more. So they started creative writing club at their school. And they're really enjoying playing soccer, which true has nothing to do with English, but it is something that they really enjoy working on their own. As an 11th grader, they are increasing the membership in the creative writing club. They actually start doing some songwriting on their own to be a little bit more creative in a different way. They become an English tutor at school so that, again, they're showing that impact on other people, showing that positive contribution. And they're still enjoying soccer. So they're showing their long-term involvement on the soccer team. And as the 12th grader, they are now the president and the founder, as we know, of their creative writing club at school. They've got a whole portfolio of songs now. They have submitted and had their work published in online and print magazines. They've won a creative writing competition. They've continued tutoring, so they're showing how they're helping other people. And they are now a 4-year member of that soccer team. Maybe they're not going to be a soccer star, but they have shown that long-term commitment, and that is something that's really valued. Okay, so now we're going to look at the case of one particular student who started working with us in the 10th grade. Okay, a little bit about this student to understand their demographics and their background. They attend a public high school in the New York area, and they're very at the top of their class, the top 2%. They have a 98 average, and their testing is perfect on the ACT. They have a 36, which is the highest you can get. And their SAT score is very strong as well at 1540. And they started off thinking they were interested in engineering, computer science, and STEM in general. And in the end, ultimately, they narrowed that interest down to material science. So this student came to us, definitely a talented student to begin with. However, we know as admission officers that the fields of engineering, STEM, computer science, not only are these common interests, but they're very competitive at the college level for college admission. So our student was extremely focused on fencing, which is a cool, different activity. But outside of the sport, he didn't really have activities that showed a focus or any leadership. He wanted to target top 10 schools rankings-wise, which meant that it's going to be really important for him to set himself apart from everybody else. So that's what we were starting with. What we did with our student is helped him explore those interests in engineering, computer science, and STEM because they were too general, again, and very common, very competitive. So we wanted to help our student narrow down those interests and be more specific, have something a little bit more unique that's going to help set him apart. So what that looked like was eventually, after learning more about engineering and about the sciences, they decided that they were most interested in material science. So down here, the example shows some notes from one of the meeting reports with the student about how they learned more about material science. And then the student went on to pursue an academic mentorship to delve further into that interest in material science. So with their academic mentor, who is an expert in their field, they started brainstorming what projects can we work on. And knowing that our student wanted to do a material science related project with a mentor, we found someone to pair him with, again, an expert in their field. And we were able to match the student with his top choice. And this individual is actually a senior engineer at Tesla. So these are not just scholars in the classroom, but they are people who are actually doing these things as careers. So this is someone who definitely knows what's going on in terms of engineering. And this was really valuable connection for the student. So along with the academic mentor, our student worked on the material science project together to help him get a better understanding. He kept a notebook, which ended up being 28 pages, and even created a working prototype. So having a deliverable, having something tangible to show his work and the result of his interest exploration, this was really valuable. And here's a picture of that prototype called the Sparrow, an ultralight gaming mouse. So maybe you have a student who's a gamer, they might enjoy this product. Okay, so where students are started with us, he really needed to focus his extracurricular activities so that he could show an impact on others. So we created this plan with him. This is an example of an extracurricular enhancement plan. So we are always thinking about how can students enhance their activities, not just say they're a member again, but really show that involvement, that depth. So we created short-term goals, long-term goals together, and signature project, looking at what that idea would be. And this is something we return to with the counselor and the student over and over again throughout their time with us as we're working together. So it's not something that we document and then never look at it again. We have a schedule where we revisit this with the student to make sure we are making progress toward those goals. So for this student in particular, remembering that he enjoys fencing, thinking about how he could combine those different passions of CS, computer science, with fencing, he actually developed an app to track the results from fencing matches, which is really cool and unique. I can't think of another student who has done something like this. And that's the idea. We want them to have something that is really unique to them, so that when this student applies to college, the admission officer can remember this student later and say, oh yeah, that's that student who made an app to track fencing results. How cool. Then when the student became a senior and started working on college applications, we worked with him on how to present these accomplishments and all of these cool things that he's done. So we thought about, what is his application persona going to be? How are we going to present him and his accomplishments in a way that help him stand out to the admission officers? And what we came up with, the counseling team together, was this is an analytically minded student athlete, an aspiring engineer. So that is the idea that we wanted to plant in admission officers' heads as they read the student's application. And we were very strategic about how we listed our students' projects so that we could highlight his leadership and those accomplishments to really show impact and how his contributions positively impacted others. We also made sure that we were showing his academic curiosity and referencing his academic persona in his essays. So there's the personal statement, of course, which is the main college essay, but then there are many supplemental essays that lots of colleges have where students can further show their personality and their interests. And the results, our student ended up being very, very happy with. He was actually accepted to MIT and to Johns Hopkins with a scholarship and many other positive results as well. So that was a really, really great outcome for our student. And we were very pleased with his work.
Thank you, Emily. And now I will show a couple more slides, review our results. 大家可以再看一下我们在引知去年的帮助学员取得了怎么样的申请结果，包括藤校的录取前30。然后这里有一份中文版本的，大家可以看一下。我们引知的服务呢是主要针对于8年级、9年级高中的学生规划课外活动以及升学，但是7年级和8年级的早期规划我们也是有的。然后大家如果有问题的话，可以在这里有2个二维码，蓝色的二维码可以直接和我预约一个免费的30分钟咨询。右边的微信二维码，大家可以添加我的微信，然后我们在平时聊天或者是预约一个比较正式的都有。我也会在我们西雅图引知群里面发布其他的关于讲座等等活动的信息，大家可以关注起来。添加我的微信之后，还会获得福利资料包，可以帮大家解决一些关于现在比较热门的关于下校申请等等的问题。好，那现在交给我们的主持人，然后引导大家可以问一些问题。
好的，谢谢倩然的解释 ，and thanks Emily for this great presentation. And 大家如果有什么问题的话，可以，因为我们人数不是特多，所以大家可以直接开麦，自己提问，也可以留言，然后我来帮大家问问题。
Hello.
好，您说。
Hi. I have a question. Should I speak English or Chinese?
是的，您说一下英语，如果方便的话，这样艾米可以听懂。
Hi, Emily. I have a question. I have a 9th grade son, and I'm just wondering, he's doing some kind of a competitive sports in his 8th grade and 9th grade, but we feel that once he reached the level, be able to attend something like a national games, and then that's pretty much it. And maybe it doesn't make sense to go forward to 10th, 11th, and 12th grade because he has to spend he has some kind of the conflict of training with his school activities. Yeah. So my question is that okay to change to another sports starting from 10th grade? Is that kind of a sign of a non-commitment or something? So we are not sure about that. Yeah.
Okay, I see what you mean. I think 10th grade is definitely still early enough to start a new sport and be able to show dedication to that new sport over a couple of years. So by the time your son is applying to college, he will have been part of that sport ideally for over 2 years now. And one thing he can also do in his applications is provide a note about the old sport, about why he stopped doing that sport. As an admission officer, I find that kind of context really helpful. So anything that you think could be a red flag or to raise any kind of question in the admission officer's mind about why they did not continue a certain activity, for example, there is a place in the applications for additional information, and that would be a great place to make a note about that.
Thank you very much. So so even for the second sports, if he's just okay, use it more as a kind of exercise, is that like basketball? Because
Yeah. That's totally fine. I actually just read an application from a student who had been on the tennis team for 4 years now, like going into the 4th year as a senior. And when he was describing his activity, he said, I barely hit the ball, but I really stuck with my team and provided great morale for the team. I was a cheerleader for my teammates. And by the end of the second season, I could even serve the ball. And so he was showing not only his dedication, but his sense of humor. So he was acknowledging that he was no Venus Williams, but but I valued, as an admission officer, I valued that he was showing that long-term commitment.
Thank you. So you say, but for the first sports, he should explain the background,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything in depth. It can just be a short note to say, I stopped X sports so that I could pursue a different sport instead and find a new talent.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so I have a question with regards to the sports. So how is it important in the overall package of the student? So my kid, basically, he doesn't like any team sports, but he does exercise like every day, and then he has like golf lessons per week. It's just that he's not in the varsity team and he never participated in any competition. So when we apply for the college, do we need to like saying, oh, we don't have any sports, or like how do we like make his package or looking more competitive?
Okay, right. So I think it's a myth that is still out there that students must be well-rounded, that they must have sports, they must have volunteering, they must have that they have to be a star on the stage and the theater group, things like that. Not saying that that was your understanding, but I think sometimes students and families worry that if their student doesn't have all these different categories, they won't be competitive. But that's not the case at all. I read plenty of strong applications from students who don't have a sport, or if they do, it's something more individual. I myself was no athlete. I was on the swim team for just 1 year, and but my talents and my dedication were in the student government and as part of the school plays. And so whatever the passion or the real interest is for your student, those are the things they should emphasize. So I can just imagine reading your student's application. As an admission officer, I'm not going to be wondering, why are there no sports? I'm going to be looking more at what is there? What is the level of dedication in the activities that they have? How have they shown that leadership and that commitment?
Oh, sounds good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? So since it's right about time, so I think that's all for today.
Can I ask the questions about what do you think about activity like a Boy Scout? This kind of activity, it's a kind of non-academic.
Yeah, Scouts is actually a great activity in an admission officer's view, because there is a real emphasis on community, working with a team, learning skills that are going to help them throughout life, and also being able to help other people. And often as they get further into Scouts, there's leadership projects, things like Eagle Scout, or for girls, there's the Gold Award for Girl Scouts. So I really value those as an admission officer. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you everyone. 谢谢大家的参与。今天因为是我们 Chime 联合组织的，所以我们的时间有限。 大家可以继续的扫码，不管是预约咨询还是添加微信，这样我们可以及时沟通。然后有后续的问题的话，我也会和大家跟进，也会有敏智的前招生官顾问的团队帮我们解答疑惑。
好的，谢谢大家。Thanks, Emily, again for today's great lecture, and thanks everyone for attending. We will upload the recording to Chime's channel for further reference. Hope you enjoyed today's lecture and have a nice weekend. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.